Also, like a division.
Yeah, so
No technology. Apologies for the delay. We're now live, it says on the screen. Yes, we're live now. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's simultaneous meetings of Waverley and Guildford Standards Committees. I'm Councillor Andy MacLeod, and I chair the Standards Committee here at Waverley. And seated to my left is Councillor Joanne Shaw, who's the chair of Guildford Standards Committee. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping comments to make. May I ask everyone to switch off your mobile phones and handheld devices to silent for the duration of this meeting. If the fire alarm sounds at any time during the meeting, and we're not expecting it to go off, everyone in the room should leave immediately through the nearest fire exits and proceed calmly to the assembling points in the fields adjacent to the main car park. Before both committees consider the business of their respective agendas this evening, I would like to remind everyone that by participating in those meetings, you are consenting to being filmed and recorded, and the possible use of these images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The recording of the meeting will be available for repeated viewing afterwards on Waverley's YouTube channel. Although the meetings have been recorded, everyone is permitted to record the proceeding using their own devices, for example, for social media purposes, provided they do not disrupt the meeting in doing so. If you're attending remotely, may I ask that you have your cameras and microphones switched off at all times during the meeting and only switch them on when you're invited to speak. For your own privacy, camera background should be set to blurred. Any non-committee members or officers who are attending remotely and who wish to speak on any item should indicate this by leaving a request in the meeting chat box. Under paragraph 3.1 of the protocol for conducting simultaneous meetings, I would now ask members and co-opted members of Waverley Standards Committee to introduce themselves, and we can start with Councillor Goodrich and move down the table.
Well, I'm Councillor Goodrich and Waverley Borough Council. Peter Nicholson, Waverley Borough Council.
John Ward, same.
So Barclay, next scene.
Joan Holroyd, co-op from Alfred Parish Council.
Julia Osborne.
No, you're.
No, you're under the other meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's so confusing.
Joe Hegan, co-opted to Waverley from Godalming Town Council.
And Paul Follows, leader of the council, observer only in this capacity.
Over to you, Jan.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Councillor Joanne Shaw. I'm the chair of Guildford Standards Committee, and I'll ask my Guildford Committee to introduce themselves. I would start with the vice chair, but he's not here. So if I go around this way.
I'm Vanessa King.
I'm Meryl English-Smith.
I'm Murray Litvak, I'm the independent lay member of Guildford.
And I'm Julia Osborne, co-opted from Sun Parish Council.
Thank you. We will now deal with the preliminary items in our respective agendas, namely apologies for absence and notification of substitutes, then declarations of interest, then minutes, and questions from the public and questions from councillors. So we start with apologies for absence from Waverley. Katie.
So we've got apologies from Councillor Rabini, and Councillor Long will be arriving a little bit later.
Thank you.
Jan.
Again, apologies for absence and notifications of substitute members. Is John online or you?
I'm quite happy to cover it if John's not here.
Thank you.
So we have apologies from Councillor Ruth Brothwell, who has no substitute, Councillor Eve Contade. We've got Councillor Meryl Rayhorse-Smith substituting, and Councillor Fiona White has given apologies, and Councillor Vanessa King will be substituting. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Can I ask members of Waverley Standards Committee whether they have any declarations of interest in relation to any items included in the agenda of this meeting, in accordance with Waverley's Code of Conduct for councillors? None?
Can I ask members of Guildford Standards Committee whether they have any declarations of interest in relation to any items included on the agenda for this meeting in accordance with Guildford's Code of Conduct for councillors?
No.
Item 3 is minutes. Can I ask members of the Waverley Standards Committee to agree the minutes of the meeting held on 7th July 2025 as a correct record? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you.
And can I ask members of Guildford Standards Committee to also agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th July 2025 as a correct record? Is this agreed? Agreed. Thank you.
Item 4 is questions from members of the public. I believe there are no questions, in fact, in terms of our committee.
Yeah, and so we've got no questions being received from the public.
Questions from members of the council. Again, I understand no questions. Thank you.
And the same for Guildford, no questions being received from members of Guildford Parliament.
Right. We now move to item 6, which is the first substantive item actually, which is to do with the proposed joint executive committee. This is the first substantive item of business and agenda. May I ask Susan Sale, Joint Strategic Director of Democracy, Law and People, to introduce it to both committees.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, very happy to bring this report to Standards Committee this evening. There is some information to update members on in that the report is drafted subject to the decisions of the 2 executive meetings. Those meetings have now taken place, and on the 9th and 14th of October, Guildford Executive and then Waverley Executive approved the establishment of a joint executive committee. So that decision is within the remit of the executives, but the report is before members of the Standards Committee this evening with a recommendation that they note the establishment of that new joint executive committee and that they make a recommendation for the constitution to be amended with consequential changes and a delegation to the monitoring officer to be able to do that. There isn't really anything else to add to the report, Chair, but in summary, the reason that the proposal has come forward is because primarily of the joint working that's happening between the 2 councils in terms of collaboration, that both councils now have some shared services, and Guildford has delegated the delivery of those shared services to Waverley. What that means is that we need some mechanism, governance mechanism for joint decision making for the delivery of those services, and also some mechanism for joint scrutiny of those joint executive decisions. So the remit of the joint executive initially will be around shared services and collaboration. Of course, it may prove to be a useful body to have in existence as we go forwards, because we don't really know at this time what future decisions may be coming around local government reorganisation, where there may be benefit in having those debates jointly between Guildford and Waverley. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Susan. I'm happy to propose that Waverley Standards Committee approves the recommendation in respect to this matter, which is set out on page 14 of our agenda. May I ask another member of the committee to second the motion? Please have 2 seconds. Peter with the first one. Then John.
I'm also happy to propose that Guildford Standards Committee approves the recommendation in respect of this matter, which is set out on page 14 of our agenda. May I ask another member of the committee to second that motion? Vanessa, thank you.
May I now ask whether any non-members of the committee on the Waverley side wishes to comment or to ask a question in relation to this item? Katie, you have to tell us if anyone's said anything in the meeting chat.
No, nothing in
No?
the chat, Chair.
Nothing in the chat, okay.
I'm sorry.
So, that's you, Jan.
May I also ask whether any non-member of the Standards Committee on the Guildford side wishes to comment or ask a question in relation to this item? Again, is there Is there anything in the chat? Kim,
Okay.
is there nothing in the chat?
Nothing, okay. So there's nothing for you to comment on, Susan. So I'm straight to that item. Thank you. Councillor Shaw and I have agreed that for this and the other substantive items on the agenda, we will invite members of both committees to comment or to ask questions and to debate the item together, rather than one committee having a debate followed by the other committee having theirs. We will now make a note of those who wish to comment and alternate between members of each committee until no one else wishes to comment or to ask a question. Then both committees will take a separate vote on their respective motions. I will now ask members of the Waverley Standards Committee to indicate if they wish to comment or to ask a question on this item. But, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is just straightforward. It's clearly wanted.
We'll just take a note of, sorry, we have to go through a process of asking both committees. You're the only one that appears, that's the only one from the Waverley side. That's good.
And is there anybody from the Guildford Standards Committee who wishes to indicate that they wish to ask a question or speak? Okay.
So it's back to you then, Peter, to make a comment or ask a
It's a
question.
very straightforward and simple comment, and I think the whole thing is straightforward. It's clearly wanted by both executives, but we have more joint working, so it's a step in the right direction, so I support it.
Is there anything for you to say on that? You don't think so? Okay, that's good. Right. We're now, the Waverley Committee will now move to vote on the motion to approve the recommendation of the Council in respect to this matter, which is set out on page 14 of our agenda as follows. That the establishment of the new Joint Executive Committee be noted, and that the monitoring officer be delegated the authority to make the necessary and consequential amendments to the Council's constitution. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you.
Guildford Standards Committee will now also move to vote on the motion to approve the recommendation to Council in respect of this matter, which is set out on page 14 of our agenda. That the establishment of the new Joint Executive Committee be noted and that the monitoring officer be delegated the authority to make the necessary and consequential amendments to the Council's constitution. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. We will now move to item 7, which is a proposed revised overview and scrutiny committee's arrangement. May I ask Susan Sale to introduce this to both committees?
Mr. Chair, that's fine, thank you. So really, this is consequential to having a Joint Executive Committee, is that one of the current difficulties we have around shared services is that because Guildford has delegated that function to Waverley, it means that decision making is within the remit of Waverley for services that are under the control of Guildford. So Waverley's Overview and Scrutiny Committee currently has the ability to scrutinise any decisions made by Waverley. Guildford's Overview and Scrutiny Committee does not have any authority to scrutinise the decisions of Waverley. So the solution to that is the Joint Executive, and if you have a Joint Executive, then it follows that you must really have a Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee to have the ability to scrutinise and oversee the work of the Joint Executive Committee. So that's the reason behind the proposal to have a Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Again, it may also be helpful going forwards in terms of decisions around the government reorganisation and other joint matters that come forwards in the next 18 months. We have the Assistant Director for Democracy and Governance has done a lot of consultation work with members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committees, and we've had quite mixed feedback from that. The proposal that we made to members was that we would consolidate the 2 current Overview and Scrutiny Committees at each council into one committee to deal with both resources and services, and then establish a new joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee between the 2 councils. therefore going from 4 committees in total down to 3. The feedback that we've received from the ONS committees themselves is that 3 of those committees felt it would be better to introduce a joint ONS committee now and to reconsider the amalgamation or reduction of their own ONS committees down to 1 at the annual council meeting in May. So the recommendation from officers is that you consider those options this evening. The one thing that I do feel duty bound to point out is that an increase in committee work at the moment does have a resource implication and does have an associated cost implication, and that servicing committees is generally done by the Democratic Services team, who are also very heavily involved in the government reorganisation matters at the moment as well, so are really quite stretched. So members do need to just be aware of those constraints and issues. The terms of reference for the joint overview and scrutiny committee that we are proposing are set out as an appendix to the report. The proposal is that there would be 12 members, and that 6 of those would be Guildford members and 6 would be Waverley members, and that there would be 2 chairs, one appointed from Waverley and one appointed from Guildford, and that they would alternate location and venue and chairing in the way that we're used to with the level existing joint committees that we have. And there would be a quorum, and that would be subject to a minimum number from each council being there. So we couldn't hold a meeting with just one council represented on that joint committee. I don't think there's anything else to add, Chair, but I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Susan. Ask members to note that the Standards Committee has been asked to consider the feedback from the ONS committees and Joint Constitution Review Group in respect of this matter, and to approve the recommendations of Council which are set out in page 27 of our agenda. I'm happy to propose a motion that Waverley Standards Committee approve the recommendation to Council in respect of this matter. May I ask another member of the committee to second the motion? Ken Peters, thank you.
Members of Guildford Standards Committee will note that you are being asked to consider the feedback from the ONS committees and the Joint Constitutions Review Group in respect of this matter, and to approve our recommendations to Council, which are set out on pages 27 and 28 of our agenda. I am happy to propose a motion that Guildford Standards Committee approves these recommendations to Council. May I ask another member of the committee to second that motion?
One 100 years ago, Prince Albert Jacob born in Trinidad.
Is Councillor?
It's Councillor Louise.
Servicemen.
You okay now?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Kimberly. May I now ask whether any non-member of the committee on the Waverley side wishes to comment and to ask a question in relation to this matter? Katie, has anyone indicated they want to ask a question?
Sorry.
Absolutely. So go ahead, leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence. So I have, firstly, thanks to all the officers for all the consultation that they've done, which has been significant across all those that need to be consulted. I watched all of those and have tried to absorb all of the comments as well. And I do take all of them on board. As has been mentioned by the monitoring officer, a joint executive, of course, requires a joint scrutiny to be its companion effectively. And there is, of course, also a democratic deficit in Guildford where services that have been transferred essentially to Waverley aren't able to be effectively scrutinised by the ONS in Guildford. So this process also addresses that democratic deficit. I think it's just worth saying that all the bodies in question have, I think, accepted the general principle of what we're trying to actually do here. And it's really just a case of how and when and in some of the details about how it operates. But in listening to some of the discussions, I wanted just to actually support the original proposals as they've been drafted, which is to have an ONS at each council and then one joint executive. And just to give you a very short set of reasons why I think that is. Firstly, along with Victoria Keel, I'm one of the 2 portfolio holders for Democratic Services, and I just want to endorse the points about capacity issues. So that's actually even more acute at Waverley than it is at Guildford, but it is very real. And that point about adding committee time and work to an already stretched Democratic Services complement, particularly at Waverley, is not one that should be ignored lightly. There will be ramifications to that decision. The other point I wanted just to focus on was the discussion about whether there'd be enough work effectively for a joint committee and whether or not it was actually therefore not a good thing for them to do to remove a committee at both councils to support a new committee that may or may not have a lot of work. And there was also a suggestion that the review for that would happen in May. Now, there are a couple of issues I have with both of those statements. The first is that actually, I think there is going to be quite a lot of work between now and May for 2 very good reasons. The first is that we are doing more shared services. Guildford and Waverley's executive met informally last night, as we regularly do at the moment. We had 6 very large items on the agenda, of which 3 of them were about new shared services potential. So there is going to be a pipeline of work on the base collaboration side. Also, most of the core early work of LGR, once we have the structural change order, which we should have the draft in a matter of weeks, assuming the government follow through on their promises, all of this will happen between now and probably March, April sort of time as we run up to the elections. So actually a review in May with those 2 things in mind actually doesn't quite, to me, seem very sensible. And in fact, actually, this is going to be the period where there might in fact be the most work for such a joint committee. So I think from me, there was an assurance that a joint committee would have the work to do because the joint executive is going to have the work to do, which I think then validates the original proposals from the officers to have one ONS on each side with a joint one that has quite a bit to do, and then also factoring in the capacity issues. So I just want to reassure everybody, I have very much taken into account all of the views expressed at ONS, at Audit, JCRG. I've listened to absolutely all of them. But I do believe the things I've just said are valid, and I hope you might take them into consideration. And thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Paul. Katie, has anyone else indicated, non-member that would wish to speak? So we have to go back to Guildford side.
Yeah, may I also ask whether any non-member of the Standards Committee on the Guildford side wishes to comment or ask a question in relation to this?
Okay.
Thank you.
I think the next thing is to ask Susan if you'd like to comment on particularly what.
Sorry.
We'll come to members in a minute. So if Susan could respond and particularly to what the reader said.
I'm happy to, Chair. I don't think there's anything specific to respond to, but I do agree with the comments that Councillor Follows has made. I think as we're going into local government reorganisation, we anticipate that there will be more joint decision making happening. And we are really very conscious and aware of resource difficulties and constraints over the next 18 months, particularly in democratic services. I don't think there will be any difficulty finding work for a joint ONS committee. And I think without one, Guildford potentially is disadvantaged from not having the opportunity to scrutinise shared services. And that could lead to at least a perception of an imbalance between the 2 councils. So I do think it's quite important to have this joint committee.
Okay. I now have to ask members of the Waverley Standards Committee if they wish to make comments and ask a question. But if you, Councillor, pretty well everybody. Okay.
Are we going to take these in turn?
You have to ask your members and then we take them about, yeah?
Yes, that's what I would. May I ask, have you made a notice?
Well, all of them.
And all of the councillors want to speak to Julia or Murray, do you wish?
No.
Okay, so coming back to the Waverley side, let's start and go down the table to Councillor Goodrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly, as a member of the Joint Constitutions Committee, we took on board what the
ONS committees of both councils had a view on, and we certainly agreed with it. And therefore, I was expecting the recommendations before the council to take that into account, because I understood it. Joint Constitution Committee did feel that the current overview and scrutiny, for Waverley anyway, and Guildford, should continue till May. And we took into account what we were told about the work then, but that there were ways to hold the meetings at the same time or do it. And I was therefore expecting the recommendation to be amended to cover what the Joint Constitution Committee felt, because my understanding was we were going to recommend to the Standards Committee that should happen. So I'm a bit surprised that we haven't amended, say, 221, and for the timing of it. So I would hope that we would deal with that. I mean, I think overview and scrutiny is a very important function that councillors have, and it shouldn't be diluted. And therefore, I would certainly be wishing to amend the amendments as far as Waverley is concerned, as the timing of when we go down to one committee in addition to the joint. Having a joint overview and scrutiny is absolutely essential. So I'm up against that. It's just the timing when we go, each council goes down from 2 to 1.
Okay, thank you. We have to start with the Guildford.
Vanessa?
Thank you. Well, I'm a member who's actually sat on the overview and scrutiny resources and services, because I keep volunteering to substitute. God help me. And I have heard what members said about the joint committee, and I think there's not really any disagreement there on the need for a joint committee. Absolutely. It's the timing of the ONS side of things, and the arguments that I've heard are a reduction in the number of committees would mean less scrutiny, that any cost we should just wear it. And I have to say I disagree with both of those assertions. I don't think that more committees means more effective scrutiny. I think you can have effective scrutiny with fewer committees. You can have better scrutiny when you've got well-supported committees, when you've got members that are able to take in the detail, and therefore, on that basis, I'm very much in favour of reducing the number of ONS committees at the soonest possible timing. I work on other committees as well, as we all do, and we have had shortages of democratic services at Guildford Borough Council, and I have huge respect for my officers and colleagues in the democratic services, and I respect them when they say that this has implications for their ability to serve us well. And I think that if we ignore what they're saying, we will suffer, essentially. Little things get missed. Am I going to get my agendas printed properly? Is my attendance going to be recorded? It's small things, but these things get missed, and I don't like that. And a decision that we make here affects the quality of work that our support staff, that our officers give us. And I think that if we are not careful, then we will be making decisions that will lead to poorer scrutiny, less effective scrutiny, because we are not so well supported. I know that there are arguments around the timing of meetings that could take place. We could have fewer meetings, for example, or a greater time period between meetings. But I don't really think there's a need to delay. I think I can understand the argument of people saying, well, we've only just restructured our committees. And I can completely understand why you would not want to go back again and chop and change things around. That feeling of a lack of settling in, changing things again is not ideal, and I agree with that. However, I think we have to be agile and we have to respond to what is being put in front of us. This is not us deciding to make a change. This is us responding to change. And so on that basis, and I'm looking for timing lines. There's no timing line. So I'll assume that my 3 minutes is nearly up. But on that basis, I support the introduction of a joint committee, a scrutiny committee, and I would like to stick with the original recommendation that overview and scrutiny committees are reduced to one in Guildford with the joint committee as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hear the next opinions from Wavell.
Thank you very much. Yes, well, I agree with the general principle. Given that more services are coming through in a joint way, I think, yes, this is absolutely the way to go ahead. And I think a single borough and a single joint committee should be able to look at scrutiny needs. And scrutiny needs are important because we have a system where we have an executive, so we do need proper scrutiny.
Yeah.
The numbers of 12 for the committees are quite reasonable. We had 11 before, so it fits the political balance, so that's quite a good make-up. What I would really like to say, I really want to have the systems working together. I think democratic services are already at full stretch. I don't see how they can be expected to do any more work. I think it would be quite reasonable. So I think, and I think you've got difficulty in filling in spaces as well. So I support the whole system, as the previous people said. Now, getting to timing, I think there's two possibilities. I mean, the first one would be that we start a complete joint system on the 1st of April and end the current one on the 31st of March. I think I might go more further than that, though, and say we shut the thing down on the 31st of December and start on the 1st of January. So both things up in the air, but I'm happy with both, but preference would be to go for the latter and start on the 1st of January.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. I agree with almost everything that's been said before. And I think there definitely is a resource issue with everything that's going on. And we were quite aware when the committees were restructured at Guildford that LGR was going to come. So the timing was maybe slightly awkward in hindsight. But there are another resource that nobody's spoken about is that there's also the resource of councillors giving up their time in the evening and reading all the paperwork. And a lot of you will have multiple roles if there's also some involvement in the LGR and the shadow cabinet. So I think not only is Democratic Services overstretched, and quite frankly, I'm amazed at how well they do the job with the resources that they have. And I'm very appreciative, but also at some point we're going to run out of councillors. We see the same councillors volunteering, doing extra work, and at some point that has got to give as well. So I think that we need to consider that too. And I agree with the recommendation, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Ward then.
Would you like to let one of the ladies on my right speak first so that we're not going admin, opposition, if they would wish to?
I'm very happy for.
What do you want? Your choice. You can go now or you can follow me.
All right, well,
Neither are very good.
all right, I'll do now, that's right then. Thank you. I'm happy with the concept of a joint committee. I think that's fine. I'm not worried about the timing. I'm just worried about the proportions on it. So what I observe is that the administration supporting councillors' representation has gone up 8%. Those who scrutinise, namely the opposition, have gone down 8%. So that's one thing to note. The second thing to note is that if we were to apply the proportion of the overall council for Waverley, then we should in fact have 2 opposition councillors on the scrutiny committee, and we only have 1. Rounding up, taking it to 2 decimal places, that's correct. I understand you don't, it is correct. I understand that you don't count non-aligned. Excuse me, I'm talking, do you mind?
The point of order under Article 12, Section G, the committee should not be taking into account information that is not accurate and therefore pertinent to the business on the agenda.
Okay,
you want to do a
so
proper-
where is it not accurate?
In that is not the numbers from Democratic Services. That's been reported at least
Check.
twice.
Can I
Sorry,
suggest
so-
that perhaps I come back on this point when all councillors have had their
Okay.
opportunity to speak?
Pardon?
Perhaps assist.
If I can say, Susan's
Councillor
offered to come
Buckland,
back
I'll
when
respond
we've
on
all
that
spoken.
point at the end.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
So my understanding is these figures are correct. And furthermore, my understanding is that under the guidelines, the OHCLG guidelines, we need to make sure that there's effective challenge from the opposition and that we have a range of political voices and perspectives on scrutiny. So 2 guidelines there. If we only have 1 in 6 councillors on the opposition side in this very important committee, I don't think we're honouring those guidelines. I don't think we've got unless
We've run out of councillors.
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll go next if I may, Chairman. I'm actually in a unique position here because, excuse me, ma'am. I have been leader of the opposition and leader of the council, and I don't think anyone else has had that. I won't say privilege. So I have seen both sides of the fence. I've chaired ONS committees. And one of the first things I did when I became leader of this council was to have a bonfire of committees, and I abolished 10. So I'm not a great favourite of multiple committees. Looking at where we are, I thoroughly agree we need a joint committee, and I think we will all probably come together on that one. The workloads, I think and hope, and maybe we need to change some of the wording, that the committees will have the freedom to meet more or less often according to the workload. That to me seems pretty simple and a given that should take place. Resource issues, I'm a little less impressed with. These are very strange times, and with the change in government and whatever going on, if we are stuck for resources, then I think we need to go out and get some more. I feel for what has just been said about representation. As I say, having been leader of the opposition, I really think we should look at the concerns of the opposition that they feel underrepresented. And if it's a case of going one way or the other, I'm personally more in favour of the opposition being overrepresented rather than underrepresented. And that's all I have to say. Oh, sorry, one more thing. I read in the notes somewhere that there was a request for the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee in certainly in this council to remain elected by the opposition. I don't think that is in the notes. I think that should happen. And if it's not in there, I would like to propose that as an amendment that the opposition should chair the ONS committee. Thank you.
Gemma, I think you're on the council.
I was going to say that I didn't need to say anything because Councillor King had said all the things that I wanted to say, but I would actually just kind of like to comment on something that Councillor Ward's just said about resource, because I also have concerns about resource within democratic services, but I also am hearing that it's really difficult to recruit at the moment with all of the headwinds that we have with LGR, and that just going out and getting more resource is likely to be problematic. So that was all I wanted to add, really.
I think one of our COPTA members might be very welcome to speak.
If I could,
You're very welcome.
Mr. Chair, I do have some experience of ONS. I was a deputy chair of ONS for 4 years, from 2019 to 2023. It seems to me that it was a question of maths here. The Waverley 2 ONS committees have been scrutinising the executive. All of that work in terms of the joint decision making goes somewhere else, so that for purely Waverley matters there is less breadth to consider. Therefore, I think the case for one committee, apart from the joint committee, is self-evident to me sitting on the outside. And the other thing I'm hearing is that there seems to be an acceptance that there will just be one each in May. And I really haven't heard any convincing arguments as to why May is better than now.
Okay, do you want to respond now? Susan?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So quite a few points raised there. I would firstly say thank you to members for acknowledging and accepting the comments made about resources. I think in a nutshell, we have resourced our 2 democratic services teams for business as usual, and even found it difficult to fully resource them for that. And that's not taken into account collaboration with local government reorganisation, which colleagues are trying to absorb into their day job. So it's nice to hear that members recognise that. I was going to pick up on Councillor Goodridge's point about the recommendations in the report. In paragraph 6, it does set out the feedback from the Joint Constitution Review Group, and the report does also set out the feedback from the 4 ONS committees. And the recommendations are actually from officers, but they do ask you to take note of that feedback and to change the recommendations we've proposed if you see fit. So we are asking you to take into account all of that feedback, and you have the ability to change, to deviate from our recommendations tonight. The other point I would come back on is regarding political balance and the proportionality that's in the report. The primary point I would make is that political balance calculations are only accurate at any particular point in time, because as things change, the calculations will change. So political balance, whilst it's in the report for illustrative purposes, it would need to be recalculated at the point in time when we're making appointments to that committee to be certain that we've got that right. But in terms of how that is calculated, there is no discretion for this committee or for officers. Political balance is calculated in accordance with the Local Government Housing Act 1989 and the political balance regulations. And a couple of things that members may be missing is that independent members are not included in the calculations because they're not actually entitled by law to any seats.
Can I check, does that include aligned as well as non-aligned?
No, the aligned are a group on the council. They are registered
So
as a
they
group.
are included.
So they are. So if we're talking about Waverley, we have a group called the Aligned Independent, but we also have 2 independent members who are not in a political group on the council, and they are not included in the calculations.
But the aligned ones are.
Yeah. So that may be why some of the differences in the figures are coming out. And that proportionality isn't calculated on the basis of the total number of members who are aligned to the administration. It's calculated per political group. So that might also be another reason. But very happy outside of this meeting to sit down with members and explain how we make that calculation, if that would be helpful. But the critical point is that we get it right at the time that we're making the appointments to any committee. Then there was also a comment about the chair being the leader of the opposition.
Not the leader of the opposition.
Sorry, a member of the opposition. Sorry. I think that is what the intention of the terms of reference is, but we may need to just tighten up the wording to make that explicit in the terms of reference. But that is certainly the intention, is that the chair of the committee would be opposition members.
We will amend to say, to make that very clear.
So if members are all happy with that, we will just make a minor amendment to the wording to make sure that that's really explicit.
And then could we make an amendment to the wording to reflect the fact that we will make it proportionate to the council at the time that it comes into effect?
Through the chair, I don't think that's necessary because that is the law. We are obliged to do that in any event.
So we don't have to stick to these numbers then?
No, we will, when we come to full council to make appointments to committees, that will be a full council decision, and group leaders will be told the number of seats that they'll have available to make their nominations.
So this is just an example.
It's illustrative for this evening's discussion.
Chair, question?
Yes, of course.
If our 2 independent members become terribly chummy and ask to be an independent group, is that allowable?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it is the political balance regulations again, that any councillors can
Thank you.
form whatever groups that they see fit. And they simply need to notify the monitoring officer that they've formed a group and who's in it, and then they are recognised as a political group.
Thank you very much.
Can I just? Is it right if I just give a point of information?
Yes.
Paragraph 3.4 in the terms of reference actually does say, subject to the total number of opposition members on the council exceeding 10% of overall membership, the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee shall be nominated by the principal opposition group, and that the vice chair of Overview and Scrutiny will not usually be from the same political group as the chair. So I think that's there already, which is an appropriate thing. Thank you.
So are members happy with how it's worded at the moment with no amendment needed? The other comment I was just going to make, Chair, was around we completely hear the comment about the workload of councillors, and that we already have several councillors who are either double or triple officers. From May, they may of course be the triple officers, and workloads for councillors as well as officers are likely to increase. And I think there is some work that can be done with the existing scrutiny committees in terms of their work programmes to make sure that that scrutiny is really effective, but not necessarily as large. And also to remember that those committees do still have the power to use subcommittees or to use task and finish groups. So if they do feel that their workload is still quite large for one committee, there's work we can do on the agenda management. And there's also the opportunity to have task and finish groups which take place in their work program and look at that.
Hello, sorry to beat a dead horse, but can we then, when we're being asked to make the recommendation, amend 610, because that is saying the proposed numerical allocation is as follows. It's not saying this is initiative, and it's not saying that there's a right to amend it in line with the proportion of councillors at the time that the committee is established. So that would need to be refined for the need to vote.
So, sorry, so can you just
610 at the bottom of page 31. 32.
In the recommendations?
No, well, 610, the proposed numerical allocation of seats is as follows, which is what's on 31, rather than this is an example and this would be proportionate with the council. It's saying that's the proposed numerical allocation.
As the monitoring officers mentioned, I think when it gets to full council, it would have been adjusted as per that point in time.
And that's fine. So can we just represent that in the wording?
So we don't have an opportunity to change the report that we've brought to you this evening. That's in the officer report, and perhaps in hindsight it could have been slightly clearer, that we should have said it was illustrative. We don't have the opportunity to change the report now, which is published and debated. What you do have the opportunity to do is to review the recommendations and make your resolutions. So I don't know if there is one of the recommendations where we could just simply add the word and equal 224. That the numerical allocation of the open scrutiny political groups and the council. Yes, so rather than as shown in paragraph 6.10, perhaps we could amend the wording recommendation 2.2.4 simply to say in accordance with the legislation regarding political balance.
Yes.
But it seems to me that the Guildford side seems to be all with one opinion, but if I may put it that way, whereas we have had some debate more on the railway side about whether we're happy with recommendations. I don't know if we should go to a vote on this or not, but at point out actually we're not the final decision taking body in any of this, are we? Final decision taking body of the full council. So we're only making recommendations, but if we can come to agreement on recommendations, that would be better. But it'd be better if both councils had the same agreement. But you want to speak?
Well, I was going to propose an amendment to 221, which would in effect say that the joint overview and scrutiny should take place immediately. But the dissolving of certainly Waverley's 2 overview and scrutiny committees that have been in being for a long time should remain in place until the next full annual council meeting.
Can I ask, should that not be recommendation 2.2.8, because that's the one has respect to the timetable of meetings.
No, that's the timetable of meetings.
Yes, and then in
The
that.
point of dissolving, it be dissolved forthwith is what 221 is saying. Timetable of meetings follows on. But the
True.
principle of 221, what I would suggest for Waverley, amendment to that effect.
Are we talking about amendment to the recommendation?
So yes,
Yes.
I think through you, Chair, that the Councillor Goodrich has proposed an amendment to recommendation 221 to effectively say that the two existing overview and scrutiny committees as currently constituted be dissolved forthwith at Guildford, but be dissolved at the next annual council meeting in Waverley. And that a joint overview and scrutiny committee between Guildford and Waverley is constituted now. So that the decision to reduce from 2 to 1 is delayed until May 26th for Waverley is the amendment.
So that's the view of the
Second.
view of the committee.
I'm sure I have a second.
Yes.
Okay, what do the members feel about this?
I go along with, I like the thing to happen concurrently, and I would happy to have everything dissolved in December, and we start from the 1st of January with a joint committee and a single borough committee. That's neat. I think it's a neat solution. I think it's a good work. I think it would be helpful for democratic services and helpful for people. Not immediately, but 31st December we go, and the 1st of January we start completely new with the new system.
What do you think about that, Councillor Goodrich?
Well, as I understand it, the executives want a joint, need to have a joint overview and scrutiny in place sooner rather than later, as I understand it. So
That's certainly
rather than
combined.
delaying everything until.
Sorry, you speak first, John, then we'll.
Okay, speaking to the amendments, we are effectively deciding we are going to go down to one overview and scrutiny committee, and we are just bouncing the time around. I'm sorry to disagree with my learned friend, but I think if we're going to do a change, let's do the change in one go and not pussyfoot around and do it in 2 bites. I don't care, particularly myself, when we do it, but I think we should do them both at the same time.
Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, I agree with John Ward completely. I would only add that I think because of the resource constraints in democratic services and the very clear pipeline of collaboration and LGR work within the next 5 to 6 months, particularly, that any delay makes this just odd. And so other than John's words, which I completely support, I think we should press to do this as soon as possible and move into this new system to deal with the LGR stuff particularly, but also the very significant collaboration work. So thank you, John. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I think I would agree with that, actually.
Just talking about we are debating the amendment proposed by Waverley members, or Waverley members, but with the consent of the chair, there's no reason why members shouldn't join that discussion if they can't vote on it. But if you were happy for them to.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one, I don't necessarily disagree. I think also as an executive member, I think while this has been discussed, I don't think we've looked at the timing. So I think we'll need a little bit more time to consider that based on the recommendations that you might give us in Guildford, obviously not Waverley.
Yeah, please.
Just in terms of the joint executive committees, those decisions have now been made. They're still subject to call-in for 5 days, and one of the meetings was only this week. So we can't say that they are effective from today, but as of next week, once that call-in period has expired, those decisions are effective. So there is a joint executive committee in existence from early next week. So members do need to be mindful that if you're going to change the timetable for a joint ONS committee, that does have an impact on the ability of the councils to scrutinise the work of the Joint Exec Committee. We don't know as yet when they will meet, but they could be meeting from as early as next week.
No, that's a good question. Yeah. I've seen in the report the timetable for the for each ONS committee to meet for each council, but I'm not seeing a timetable for when the joint committee would start meeting. So when would that happen? If, in theory,
that's subject to a conversation.
Okay.
We're waiting really to see whether it is approved and adopted.
I see.
But the decisions will go to full council on the 22nd and the 23rd of October. So if approved and appointments are made to that joint committee that evening, then it could start meeting immediately.
Immediately,
thereafter.
okay.
We would be having conversations with the chair about diary management at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, given that the joint exec is going to be in place quickly, I feel that we do need to have a joint ONS as soon as possible. And the discussions that we had earlier about resource, I think it's the worst of all worlds if we have more committees immediately. So I feel we should do both things as soon as possible.
What do other members feel about that?
I think I'm convinced now. I mean, I would be happy to go for December, but the way other speakers have said, I'm quite happy to go in one down now. Yeah.
Okay. Any objections to that?
I have a proposal.
Yes.
I would just say that it's, tail wagging the dog or whatever. What is right is that we should do the right thing as councillors. And I'm quite happy to be cooperative, I'm sure, between the councils to try and coincide meetings to try and cut down this time and meetings and that sort of thing. But I do think still there's an awful lot of things going on that affect Waverley only, that we need to be able to continue to properly overview and scrutinise. So I am proposing the amendment to 221. I think we've agreed an amendment to 224. But I still feel that.
Do we have to vote on?
So you need to take a vote on
We
the
need to
proposed
vote
amendment
on
on to
221. Can you make absolutely clear what the two options are? Susan, if you'd be good enough to do that.
And this is just for Waverley. This is just for Waverley members. So I think the proposed amendment is that 221 is amended to read that the two existing open scrutiny committees at Guildford Borough Council, as currently constituted, be dissolved forthwith, and that the two existing overview and scrutiny committees at Waverley Borough Council be dissolved at the annual council meeting in May 2026 and replaced by one. And in addition, that a joint overview and scrutiny committee between the two councils is established forthwith.
Okay, so we're either going to have go with the proposal I've written or with this alternative.
Well, you need to vote on the amendment first.
Yeah. Okay. So can we decide who's voting for Councillor Goodwich's amendment?
It's two.
Yeah.
Those against.
Those against?
That's
Okay.
four. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's
The
the amendment.
The amendment
lost.
is
So then
defeated.
we're back to the
We're sticking with the original.
original recommendations
Recommendation.
other than 2.234, which I think members have agreed to that one.
Okay. But is that agreed that, do I need to read it all out?
Yes, please.
Members are happy to take the amendments as read with the amendment to number 4, yeah? We agree to that, thank you.
Could we just have a show of hands for that, just to
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. And those against? Thank you.
Okay. Right, I think it's over to you now, Joanne, to get this.
Thank you. So Guildford Standards Committee will now move to vote on the motion to approve the recommendations in the agenda for full council on the 23rd of October in respect of this matter. So we're voting on dissolving the current ONS committees and creating a joint committee. Looking at Susan.
One sold and one joint.
Yes.
Immediately, like as soon as possible.
Yes,
As soon as the decisions are.
yes. So could I ask Guildford members to vote on this? Vote in favour of the
Yes.
motion, with a show of hands. Sorry.
Oh,
Oh,
so the motion's carried by both
Okay.
councils.
Right, thank you. I think we now, no, we don't.
I'm new to this committee, so.
Okay, we now move to item I8, which is the proposed joint standards committee. We ask Susan Fitzgerald to introduce this item to the committee.
Yes, certainly, Chair. So hopefully, members of the Standards Committee will recognise the fact that their agendas have been almost identical for some time now, and that we have moved to a position where we're holding simultaneous meetings in any event, and hopefully you'll see the benefits that has had when you're making very similar decisions, that you're able to hear each other and debate and points raised by the council, and to know whether you are making the same decisions or whether there's risk in one or making a decision one month and then making a different decision about a joint matter for the following month, for example. So I think you are now pretty used to holding your meetings simultaneously, but probably all members would recognise that it's slightly clunky in terms of the smooth running of meetings. And that would hopefully not be the case if it was truly a joint committee making decisions. So it seems it's less of a sort of essential consequence to joint working, but it seems like a logical step for this committee to be acting on a joint basis. And if there were separate matters that needed to come before the joint committee, that can still be accommodated. But as I say, pretty much for the last 12 months, the agendas for the two meetings have been identical, because really the work of Standards Committee surrounds things like the Constitution, which is now very much aligned, not quite identical, but aligned between the two councils, breaches of code of conduct and ethical standards matters, and the two councils have the same code of conduct that they're working to now, and they have the same training arrangements, etc. So most of the matters within the remit of standards members are now aligned and joint in any event. So there's nothing really to add to the report, but I'm very happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Susan. Members, you will note that the Standards Committee has been asked to provide any comments on the proposed joint Standards Committee terms of reference and to approve the recommendations to council was set out on page 58 of our agenda. I'm happy to propose that Waverley Standards Committee approves these recommendations to council. May I ask another member of the committee to second the motion? Councillor Goodrich, thank you.
I'm also happy to propose that Guildford Standards Committee approves the recommendations for council on the 23rd of October in respect. Sorry.
That's okay.
Shall I carry on? Yes, sorry. I thought I'd done something wrong. The committee approves the recommendations to full council on the 23rd of October in respect of this matter, which are set out on page 58 of our agenda. May I ask another member of the committee to second that motion? Thank you, Vanessa. Councillor Clements.
May I now ask whether any non-member of the Standards Committee on the Waverley side wishes to comment or to ask a question in relation to this item? Anyone?
Is there anyone in the chat, please?
None in the chat. Leader wants to comment.
No, nothing on this one, but thank you very much then.
Okay, that's John.
May I also ask if there are any non-members of yeah, no. Thank you.
May I now ask any members of the Standards Committee to indicate if they wish to comment or ask a question in respect to this item? Okay, we have one.
May
Oh,
I,
sorry, we have two. Holden.
may I also ask members of Guildford Standards Committee to indicate if they wish to comment or ask a question on this item? One, thank you.
Okay, we can start with Gemma. She's got her hand up first.
So just a quick one, hopefully, for the monitoring officer. So I see that if there were a matter that applied only to one council or the other, that voting and the quorum would only take that council into account. So in practice, if we had, for example, an ethical issue relating to a member of one council or the other, would we call a meeting of the joint standards committee? And everybody would in theory need to attend, although for quorum purposes, it wouldn't matter if the other councils, or would we suggest that in fact, only those at the relevant council needed to attend in the first place?
So thanks for the question, Councillor Long. Good, really good question. I think you wouldn't have the option to call a separate standards committee because they will be dissolved. So the only option is to bring that matter to the joint standards committee. What you would expect is that it would probably be the last item on the agenda, and that there would be a recognition that members from the other council wouldn't have the ability to vote on that matter. And in fact, in practice, in reality, probably some of them would leave the meeting just leaving sufficient to be quorum for that meeting, and that those members that had to remain would not vote on that item. So there is a risk in practice of a small inefficiency in that we would need to retain some members for the meeting to be legitimately able to continue. But in reality, it doesn't happen very often that we have those type of matters, and that would just mean that some members need to remain to be quorum. But it would just be one council that would be making their decision on, for example, which code of conduct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mark.
Thank you. I need to give some context to my statement that I'm going to throw into the mix. My role as an independent lay member is to act as the man on the Clapham omnibus, to ask awkward questions, ask straight questions and get straight answers, and continue to ask those questions until I get a straight answer. I was chairman of Spelthorne Standards Committee for 20 years. And in that time, we never needed to vote because standards should be completely non-political. There should be no political bias. However, we get into my pet subject, and Guildford members will know I've raised it before. Myself and Julia have no ability to vote, and even in the joint committee, there is just over 28% of the committee cannot vote. I think it's almost an academic exercise, but I think it's disappointing that we can speak, offer an independent view, and yet we have no ability to vote. In every item so far discussed and debated, we have not had the ability to agree or disagree. That, to me, is taking democracy away from 28% of people. I could well be a lone voice, but that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to ask awkward questions and make awkward statements. The other point I'd like to make is, and I'm not a great wordsmith believer, I'm not a great believer in papers being produced by committee, write it by one person, two people at most. I look at page 65 and there is mention of an independent person. There is mention of the independent person going through on page 69. There is no mention on page 73, but there is a mention on page 75. I'm sure it hasn't fallen through the cracks, but I just want to check that that's correct as much as anything.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I can certainly confirm that the intention is that the Joint Standards Committee would have 4 co-opted members on it, 2 from Guildford and 2 from Waverley, and that the 2 from Waverley would be parish council members, and from Guildford it would be 1 independent member and 1 parish member, because that's the way that the Standards Committee is set up at the moment. I'm struggling very quickly to find the page where it would say that in the terms of reference, but it certainly should be in there, and that is the
I
proposal.
might have misinterpreted it, but as I say, it's mentioned on 65 and 69, not on 73, and then does get a mention on 75.
So it's mentioned on 2.3, 2.3.
That's on page 65.
65.
On page 69, which is the terms of reference for the joint committee.
In 2.3.
Yeah.
It's mentioned in 67, 4.6.
So where is it that it's not been mentioned? Sorry,
I'm sure it's there somewhere, but I just couldn't see it.
Which place do you think it was supposed to be there?
I thought there should be some mention of the independent person on page 73. We're talking about the committee form, structure and composition.
so page 75 is part of the document relating to the Standards Committee currently, I believe. That's not the proposed joint committee.
I'm talking about 73 though.
Which
Yeah,
bullet
that's
point?
Waverley's existing.
So yes,
Purposes.
it's headed on page 73 at the top. That is the Standards Committee, not the Joint Committee. So
Okay.
if you look at the pages above, starting, at page 69, which is headed the Joint Standards Committee Terms of Reference.
It's
the
in
proposal
there.
for the Joint-
Great,
the
that's
Joint
fine.
Committee,
Yeah.
and it is in there at number 2.
That's fine then. Yeah.
Thanks for
But the mountain is quite a bit right to the around the river field.
I don't think that was a question. I thought it was a statement.
A statement, okay.
It was a question as well, because, you know, why don't we get a vote? There's the question.
I'll refer to Susan.
I think general practice is that co-opted members have an ability to join in the debate. And I think you said that you've not been allowed to agree or disagree. I'm not sure that's quite right, because I think in your debate, you have an opportunity to influence the committee and to make it very clear whether you do agree or disagree. It's just the formal part of the voting. But your input is really welcomed to the debate, and that ability to influence members with your suggestions is really the role that we have co-opted members, because you bring a different perspective, different background, different experience. So you are very welcomed into the comments in the debate. I think normal practice is that co-opted members generally don't vote, and certainly we have other committees within the council that have co-opted members on them that also don't have an ability to vote. But the other thing I would say is that if we're ever dealing at a Standards Committee with ethical matters, so for example, a breach of the code of conduct, where it's a parish councillor, we cannot hold that meeting without a parish councillor being present to input to the determination of that breach. So where it's a very specific parish council matter, we won't hold that. We're not corvettes without a parish council representative in there.
Unfortunately, in Spelthorne for 20 years from the inception in the year 2000, I was one of the first chairmen appointed. The co-opted members could vote, but we didn't need to vote because it was non-political. So we debated and discussed until we all agreed.
Paul wants to.
I just wanted to chuck in two bits on either side of that question. I mean, you flagged it as a form of democratic deficit from one perspective, but I think one response to that could be that as you are not elected to either Guildford or Waverley, for you to vote on it would in fact be an abuse in the other direction. But then I look at some of the other things we have at Waverley, and the one I would cite specifically would be the Landlord Tenants Board, where we specifically give tenants, Waverley tenants, the right to vote equally with Waverley members on that board. I mean, effectively, but that is an executive working group. It's not a decision-making function. And just to make sure that Susan doesn't have a heart attack in the corner. So we have at least established in principle at some points where we have allowed non-Waverley members to vote, but not on formal decision-making functions. So, I mean, I see where you're coming from. I don't believe other members of the executive here, I have to say, would probably support people who aren't elected to Waverley Borough Council voting on matters that are decisions of the council. I would consider that to be a democratic issue from the other side, I'm afraid.
I'm quite happy to merely put it out there so you have my views on the record. I have exercised democracy by offering that view. I'm not asking any individuals. I respect your opinion. We will not agree. We will not fight over it, though. That's democracy.
I think the other member who wants to speak was
can I just come back on that? I would like to say that I was very sort of impressed the way the discussion went between the councillors today. And I think people changed their minds based on what other people had said. So I think if you had contributed to that, I think it would have had just as much impact.
I think Councillor Ward wanted to speak as well.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I certainly did, but Councillor Long asked such an excellent question, which word for word of what I was going to say is how
Yeah,
it's a good one to
well, I just wanted to say that, but bearing in mind what Councillor Long raised, I think we could make an improvement to our terms of reference and the quorum, where we could add the words, save that when an item relates to one council only, the other council members have no need to attend for quorum purposes. Because it just seems to me, if we were having an important item where we decided that we needed to take some action related to one council only, and for example, in Waverley, and Guildford decided to go home straight away, so we weren't quorate, we couldn't make a decision about that person. And that, or if it was an ethical thing, or anything else that just happened to relate to our council. I mean, I think Susan Sale said, well, we would have a bit of an administration problem. Well, we can remove that problem by putting that in, it seems to me. Normally it'd be 3 each, but if one council has a problem, whether it be Guildford or Waverley, the other councillors of the other council can go home and it wouldn't cause a problem to the quorum. It seemed to me a sensible just thing to slip in case it should arise.
Through you, Chair. I think it's a really good point and it's a really good suggestion. I mean, the quorum is high with 3 members having to stay and sit through something that doesn't directly impact them or affect them. I guess the flip side of that, though, I would say, is that you are a joint committee and you're not a joint committee if only one councillor is represented on that. So I think ensuring that the other council is represented in the debate and the discussion and is present, but doesn't have a voting right, almost is the compromise between sovereignty of one council that is decision making for that, but also you being a joint committee. And the other point I would make is that part of the benefit of the joint committee should be that you've got a bigger pool of views and different people, different perspectives. And if it was, for example, a Waverley only matter, although Guildford members couldn't vote, they could join in the debate and they could steer and they could give a view, which may be helpful, but I do also recognise that quorum of 3 is quite a burden, quite onerous. And it might be that members want to reduce that to 1, just so that the chairs both stay for the entirety of the meeting or something like that.
There's a lot of nodding going on.
Well, looking across the table, we are a bit bereft of Guildford members today.
They're probably all sitting in the council
I would
chamber.
imagine that if we are just talking about something Waverley, we might have even less. So I think Susan's suggestion that the poor chair is forced to stay, and in case the rest abscond, is probably fair and reasonable.
And we all agree to that?
Perhaps if I can suggest that we just say in the terms of reference 1 member, and that normally in practice that would be the chair, but it gives some flexibility if the member is staying. Yes,
So
so
we're
if we
suggesting
made-
the quorum of meetings is just 1 from each side. That's a quorum of 2 people to run that seems a bit.
Well, we've currently got a quorum of 6 with 3 from each side.
Yeah.
We could reduce the quorum for all matters to be 4, with at least 1 from each council, which was the original proposal, I think, but some feedback was that it should be more than that. Or we could leave the quorum as it is for all joint business, and then say if there's a matter affecting just 1 council, that the quorum is reduced to 4. Yeah.
Yeah.
4, with at least 1 from the other
Yeah,
council.
I think that's very sensible.
I'm happy with that.
Okay. We're all agreed. So
Yeah.
we
So
can amend it.
we'll word that.
Okay. Right, okay. We now need to vote on the recommendation to the full council.
If I was an independent.
So the Waverley Standards Committee will now move to vote on the motion to approve the recommendations of council for set out on page 50 of the agenda. I'm not supposed to read them out because we've all seen them, so that's the proposal. I'll be agreed.
With the amendments. in the
Oh, with the
quorum.
amendments as requested, yeah.
Sorry, I was just conscious that we just a vote, please.
Oh, you'd like a vote,
Yes,
okay.
please.
Do we have a vote on that?
Thank you.
What am I voting on?
Concentrate, council. Item 9 in.
Oh, it's item 9, yes.
15.
Right, I'm also happy to propose that Guildford Standards Committee approves the recommendations to full council on 23rd of October in respect of the matter which set out on page 80 of our agenda, including the amendments that we've just discussed about quorum. May I ask another member of the committee?
You just want to take a vote.
Yeah, can we just take a vote? Because I lost my page.
Just a show of hands?
Yes, please.
That's amended.
It's page 15. Oh, I was still on. Yeah.
I've lost my
Just
place.
one thing whilst I organise on the
Page 15, items.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So members, just if I could just go back to the previous item very briefly, just to check for the minutes, a bit of clarity, that we amended one of the recommendations to be in accordance with political balance. It was very clear that Waverley members voted on that amendment. It wasn't quite as clear that Guildford members did. So just for clarity in the minutes, can I make sure that Guildford members, when they voted, were voting in accordance with that amendment as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, we now move on to item 9, the proposed executive working group protocol. May I ask Faith Wendy to introduce this item to both committees? Faith has been patiently waiting.
Good evening, committee, and thank you, Chair. The report set in front of you introduces an exec working group for Guildford and also makes some minor amendments to the Waverley Borough protocol that's currently existing. The purpose of this is to just ensure transparency, consistency, and alignment across both authorities. It also supports governance practice. It strengthens our arrangements by clarifying purposes of the working groups, the memberships, the operations, and their reporting responsibility. So there's a clear alignment from the work the executives are working, how they're operating, and then reporting back that information back to the exec so they can. There's also some monitoring as well. There isn't the actual protocol is found in Appendix 1. The amendments to the Waverley are found in Appendix 2, and happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Faith. I am happy to propose that Waverley Standards Committee approves the recommendations to full council on 22nd October 2025 in respect of this matter, which is set out on page 80 of our agenda. May I ask another member of the committee to second the motion, please? Councillor Goodrich, thank you.
I am also happy to propose that Guildford Standards Committee approves the recommendations of full council on the 23rd of October 2025 in respect of this matter, which is set out on page 80 of our agenda. May I ask another member of the committee to second the motion? Thank you.
May I ask whether any non-member of the Standards Committee on the Waverley side wishes to comment or ask a question?
Is there anyone like it?
Just to add, I mean, I brought this into Waverley a few years ago in that there lacked any kind of task and finish structure for the executive at Waverley at all. And in bringing this in, the aim was to provide a mechanic that could be supported by democratic services to look at different policy areas, to have a structure to those discussions, actions be recorded, but also crucially to bring in other people, whether they be members of the council or outside expertise, to come in and contribute properly to those things and weigh in a meaningful way. I'm very happy to support the proposed amendments to the Waverley Protocol, and I certainly would recommend to Guildford that this has been something that has aided the executive on this side, and I think would aid yours as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
And may I ask if there are any non-members of the Guildford? No.
In that case, would Faith like to respond to comments and questions from the leader in this case? Should this is
Thank you very much for your comments, and happy to take any other questions.
Okay. We now move to ask the members of the Waverley Standard Committee to indicate if they wish to comment or ask questions now in relation to the size. One member.
And may I also ask if members of Guildford Standards Committee to indicate if they wish to comment or ask a question in relation to this matter?
Okay. Let's start with Councillor Ward.
Page 97, 6.11. I may be totally ignorant or have missed something, but I believe so.
Yes.
Yes.
Which point?
6.11 talks about the Golden Triangle. I thought that was in India, and I don't know anything about the Golden Triangle here. Could someone tell me what that means, please?
I think that's in relation to the next report.
You're on the wrong item, John.
Am I? Oh, my apologies. I'll store that one up for you. I just want to go home.
It's hurrying us along. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. Only to say that I appreciate this this protocol being introduced to Guildford Borough Council. I think it will really help us to help our executive to be even more effective than it already is, to be more inclusive and in terms of getting more people to come in, and also age transparency as well, because people will be able to have some view of those little conversations that happen outside and combine together to make our executive work effectively. So I'm definitely in support of this protocol. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Waverley Standards Committee will now move to vote on the motion to approve the recommendation to Council respective of the matter that is set out on page 80 of our agenda. Do we agree?
Agreed.
Guildford Standards Committee will also now move to vote on motion to approve the recommendations of Council in respect of this matter which is set out on page 80 of our agenda. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Right. We now move to item 10, which is a code of practice and good governance for local authority statutory officers. May I ask Angela Watson to introduce this item to both committees, please?
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay.
So yes, in July 2024, LLG, who is the stands for the lawyers in local government, SIPFA, which is the public finance accountancy body, and SOLES, which is the organisation for local authority chief executives, brought in this new code of governance for the statutory officers. I'll answer Councillor Ward's question first, because the golden triangle is made up of the three statutory officers. So the chief executive, actually head of paid service is the role, but that's usually the chief executive. The chief finance officer, section 151 officer, and the monitoring officer. So that is the golden, and the idea is that those three officers work very closely together, and that's the golden triangle of protecting governance and the interests of the council. So that's the golden triangle. So those three organisations worked together and brought in this code. It built on, there was already a existing code for a monitoring officer protocol, and there was other sort of national guidance, particularly say around best value duty. But the feeling was, I think, particularly prompted by a run of section 114 notices and auditor reports into failing authorities, where very often those reports identified that there was perhaps there was a dysfunction in the way that those three officers in particular were working together. So in 2024, they brought in this new code, where it's slightly different from anything that had gone before, as it has these 7 standards that it recommends that the three officers work together following a set of standards. As I say, all aimed at making sure they work effectively together, that they give the best advice possible to their authorities and implement its decisions. So the proposal set out in the report, Chairman, and Madam Chairman, is that both councils adopt this code. It will, if adopted, form part of the Constitution. So, technically speaking, those three officers, if they belong to certain sort of professional bodies, will be bound by it anyway. But in particular, say a monitoring officer doesn't have to be legally qualified. They usually are, but so by putting it into the Constitution, it will create an expectation on those three officers that they will be aware of it, adhere to it, and work in the spirit of it. I hope I've set out in my report that they already are. So, but it's just something, and it signals, I think, as I said in the report, that as an authority you consider it to be important, and it raises the profile of those officers and the roles that they have to fulfil. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, unless there's any questions.
Thank you. So I'm happy to propose that Waverley Standards Committee approves the recommendation to full council on 22nd October 2025 in respect of this matter. It's set out on page 94 of our agenda. May I ask another member of the committee to second the motion? Thanks, Peter.
And I am also happy to propose that Guildford Standards Committee approves the recommendation to full council on the 23rd of October in respect of this matter, which is set out on page 94 of our agenda. I ask another member of the committee to second.
Yeah, now ask whether any non-member of the Standards Committee on the Waverley side wishes to comment or ask a question in relation to this item.
No.
No, thank you.
And can I ask if you've got any other ones? Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So we now move to comments and questions from members of the Waverley side. Does anyone wish to comment or ask any questions? None?
Is there anything on the Guildford side?
Okay. Right, the Waverley Standards Committee will now vote to move the motion to approve the recommendation to council with respect to this matter, which is set out on page 94 of our agenda. So do we agree with the recommendation? Agreed.
And the Guildford Standards Committee will now move to vote on the motion to approve the recommendation to council in respect of this matter set out on page 94 of our agenda. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. So we now move to item 11, which is social media policy for council. We again ask Tace to be good enough to introduce this item to board committee.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee. So the report in front of you introduces to each of the Standards Committee a proposed social media policy for councillor. It's simply to provide a clear, practical guidance on responsible and lawful use of social media. The policy itself draws on national guidance, good practice, and ensures that councillors are well equipped in navigating the digital environment, which is in a professional, inclusive manner, which is significantly changing with new applications always coming online. The policy was presented to the Joint Constitutional Review Group on the 5th of August, and they had quite substantive comments, which have been addressed in Appendix 1, and they're shown in red, specifically focusing on wanting to make sure that the policy wasn't in any way curtailing rightful democratic debate and in terms of whether it's policy or communications online. So that's been addressed, and I'm happy to take any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Fair. I'm happy to propose that Waverley Standards Committee approves the recommendations to full council on 22nd October 2025 in respect of this matter, which set out on page 124 of our agenda. May I ask another member of the committee to second the motion? Gemma, thank you.
I'm also happy to propose that Guildford Standards Committee approves the recommendation to full council on the 23rd of October in respect of the matter set out on page 124 of the agenda. May I ask another member of the committee to second my motion?
May I now ask whether any non-member of the Standards Committee on the Waverley side wishes to comment or ask a question in relation to this item? No?
And there is no Guildford non-member there.
Okay. May I now ask members of the Waverley Standards Committee to indicate if they wish to comment or ask a question on this item? Councillor Ward.
I've just lost what I wanted to query.
May I just ask if members of the Guildford Standards Committee indicated? Thank you.
So, Councillor
I
Ward.
will be with you in 1 second when I Go ahead.
Possibly
Go ahead.
breach.
go ahead.
Can I just check, what is the actual intention of 2.2, where it says, councillors must not make personal criticisms of other councillors? Just the personal there, it means sort of unprofessional, not specific to a person. Yes, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It's just reiterating the point that the communications on social media, they're exactly the same standards of behavior are accepted in when you're sending off an email correspondence or at public events. And it's just to clarify that personal isn't necessarily saying you can't direct communication to a particular named person. It's just the level and the standard of it rather than the particular person.
Thank you. I think it's an excellent report. I think it's much needed. Sadly, I was involved as an independent person in a case involving social media. This document would have avoided it. I particularly like 4.1 and 4.2, where it gives what I call an idiot's guide. Would you be happy for this comment to appear on the front page of a newspaper or to be quoted in a council meeting? I think that is good. It highlights. And then 4.2, these views are my own and do not represent the position of the council. I think that's superb, so that if a member does err and they end up with an investigation and appear before a committee, then those are killer questions the committee can ask. would you be happy having made that comment for it to appear on a newspaper? So I think that's great that it's in there, as well as the comments about humour and sarcasm and irony. It's all too easy to respond to something in social media, the wrong time of the day, maybe having had a meal or a drink, when perhaps in the cold light of day, you wouldn't have responded in that way. So I think it's excellent. So even though I can't vote, I support it entirely.
Right. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry about this. I tell off people who bring up things that aren't quite right and they don't understand, but page 127, 10.1. I don't understand it. It doesn't seem to make sense. Could someone explain it and add in some words so that it makes sense?
10.1.
It says members may be unclear as to the scope, breach, various conditions. There's
I
something
think
missing.
yes. Apologies for that. I need to reword that sentence, so apologies for that. I should say members may be unclear as to the scope of the breaches and of the various provisions of the code, and that's talking about the members' code of conduct and also any other legal provisions that apply in relation to communication. So that's a typo, and I'll make amendments to that before it's presented to council.
Okay, thank you for that. That's what I guessed it meant, but it just didn't read very well. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else wishing to comment?
No.
In that case, the Waiver Standards Committee will now move to vote on the matter to approve the recommendation to council respective matter was set out in page 124 of our agenda. So have we agreed? Agree with the recommend. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the Guildford Standards Committee will now move to vote on the motion to approve the recommendations passed in respect of the matter set out on page 124 of our agenda with the amendments. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to item 12, the proposed police reporting protocol. Here again, I ask Faith to introduce this item to both committees.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee. So this report seeks approval to adopt a police reporting protocol. It sets out clear respective roles of the police and the council when handling any allegations of criminal behaviour. This is normally in relation to any of the Localism Act, Section 32 onwards. Also, it builds on some of the work that Guildford did in 2015 as part of the Howie Ainslie review, which actually recommended drawing up a protocol to strengthen the standards arrangements where complaints, allegations of criminal. This is normally in terms of if there's a failure to declare voting on an item when you have an interest, those kind of allegations, there are criminal consequences to that. We have consulted with Surrey Police, who are also supportive. They think it's a very good protocol, and they're happy to support it, and it's actually in response to some of the issues that we've had and some of the cases we have to deal with recently. So I'm happy to take any other questions or comments on this particular policy and protocol.
Thank you. I'm happy to propose that the Waverley Standards Committee approves the recommendation with respect to this matter, which is set out in page 140 of the agenda. May I ask another member of the committee to second the motion? Thank you, Councillor Goodley.
I'm also happy to propose that Guildford Standards Committee approves the recommendation in respect to this matter, which is set out on page 140 of our agenda. May I ask another member of the committee to second the motion? Thank you.
May I now ask whether any non-member of the Standards Committee on the Waverley side wishes to comment or ask a question in relation to this matter? None? Thank you.
I wish to say something, yes.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
No,
not members.
we'll come to that. But,
I'll probably be fired by now.
And we still haven't got any non-members attending.
Right, may I now ask any members of the Standard Committee to indicate the wish to comment or ask a question? Councillor Ward, anyone
Um,
else? Sorry, Lady Dan Dawson. We'll have to go to the Guildford side now.
Yes. May I ask members of Guildford Standards Committee to indicate if I would like to say anything?
Okay, so
Thank
this,
you, Councillor Osborne.
so we start with Councillor Ward.
Okay, I just have an overall question. This specifically refers to councillors being reported to the police. My overall question is, does something similar apply to officers of the council? And my second point, which you'll hate me for, is on 6.4, can we stick an E on police, please?
Would you like me to answer the question or take the additional comment?
Do you want to answer that one, Faye?
Yes, so this policy applies only to councillors. There are different mechanisms for officers, so it's part of their employment. So there'll be HR policies that they would use to report any issues that we had with staffing. So this one is specifically to align with current standards arrangements for councillors. And I will add the E. So.
Can I just add to that, Chair? Faith's absolutely right, but it's because there is a criminal offence for councillors. So section 25-ish, I think, of the Localism Act defines a criminal offence for
pecuniary
councillors
interests
to fail to declare their pecuniary interests. It isn't the same criminal offence for officers.
Understood.
Thank you.
Councillor Osborne.
This is my chance then, as a non-voting member of the committee, to try and influence debate. And I do hope to influence debate, or at least start a debate this evening, which I think is important for councils going forward. This is a protocol which is useful to have, but what worries me is that we are talking about punitive measures, we are talking about councillors potentially picking up criminal convictions, and I think we need to balance that with councillor well-being. It has to be remembered that councillors, and particularly parish councillors, are unpaid volunteers who put themselves forward with the best of intentions, often to serve their communities. And like all human beings, it is possible for them to make a mistake. In the context of DPIs, and particularly declaring your home addresses, when you're a newly elected councillor, there is room for confusion, because when you stand for election, you are allowed to exempt yourself from putting your address on the public record. So then you become a councillor. And perhaps if you've not followed the guidelines properly, or if we haven't given them training, and I'm not sure, if there is that training in place at the moment, a mistake possibly can happen. I also would like to query, who is ultimately responsible for checking a register of interest, because they come in, particularly with parish council, they're submitted to the parish clerk and then on to Guildford Borough Council. If an error is picked up, hopefully that councillor can be notified they haven't given, all the necessary information, and then that councillor doesn't find himself in a very difficult position further on down the line. I also have to flag that in this day and age, when councillors generally experience, I'm afraid to say this, often more grief than gratitude for the service that we give, it has been part of a national debate by the Minister, I think, for local government, about whether all councillors should automatically have their home addresses removed, kept private from public view. But obviously the monitoring officer would know our home addresses. So if we did vote and not declare a pecuniary interest in relation to an item, obviously that could be picked up. Obviously there is the balance between transparency, but also, as I say, protecting councillor well-being. How do we make councillors feel safe, encouraged to come forward and stand for election? I don't want to venture too much into this matter, but it has been an issue for Sen Parish Council. There was a complainant that picked up that not all information was there. An individual was picked up about it. As a result of that, the complainant then took himself round to the councillor's home addresses, putting a letter through everyone's door, it has created a lot of anxiety in my council. And I just think as a council, all of us, it's about time possibly we start debating this issue, whether councillors should have to automatically put their addresses on the public register. I know there are procedures that we can apply for sensitive interest, but should that apply immediately? That would require a protocol by the council, obviously, to be agreed and debated at full council by everybody. But it has happened in the case of Bath and Somerset and Thurrock councils because they are concerned about intimidation and the rise of it generally in relation to public figures. So thank you for listening to my.
I'd just like to say, when I was elected, I actually had a conversation with Susan specifically about this thing, but I think you said it was beyond the council's remit to deal with.
Yeah, should I
Yes.
come in now? So I think Councillor Osborne's making some really, really good points, and I'm aware of the situation that she's referring to. The safety of councillors is paramount, and we have seen in the media and perhaps more locally as well, we have seen some difficult situations that councillors have been in by virtue of their personal details being disclosed. So I have a lot of sympathy with a lot of points that are raised. I think the difficulty is that we have to act in accordance with the current legislative provisions. So as a council, we can lobby for change, and I know there is a lot of debate and discussion for change, but at the current time, we have to act in accordance with the Localism Act. All that does is provide obligations for councillors to disclose their DPIs, one of which is your beneficial interest in property, which for most people is their home. So the starting point is that it is a legal requirement to disclose it. Having said that, we have this provision called sensitive interests, which is where if a councillor feels that disclosing that in the public arena would lead to intimidation or violence to either them or a close associate or their family members, then it can be deemed a sensitive interest, which means, as you say, that the monitoring officer and the team know the address, but it's not put on the public register. All I would say is that a few years ago, after the Joe Cox murder, there was new legislation, new guidance, provided to all monitoring officers across the country to say that that legislation should be interpreted with a very, very low threshold. So really, it simply needs a councillor to say that they have a concern about intimidation or violence. And I think most monitoring officers would take the view that they would accept that should be a sensitive interest. So this council doesn't have the power to make a decision that we just blanket, don't publish them at all. But, and I understand that that might be good if we could, but what we can do is people can request that their home address is a sensitive interest, and provided they have a genuine belief that disclosing it will lead to a risk of intimidation and violence, then it will be removed from the public register. Can I just make one more point, sorry, about the protocol itself, about referring matters to the police. Again, I completely appreciate the sentiment about councillors' well-being and that there shouldn't be punitive action, etc. But I think the question of this protocol really is more, I would look at it from the duty and obligation of officers. So if there is a criminal offence and we have evidence that that criminal offence has been committed, then is it for an officer to make a decision not to refer that to the police? So I think some of the points that are made are very valid points, but are matters for the police to consider when they have that referral. And indeed, that has been our experience, where we have taken the decision that we do actually need to satisfy our obligations by notifying the police. We have seen examples where they've taken all of those issues into account and not taken any punitive action.
Can I just come back in terms of the punitive action? It is, as I say, it is. I mean, again, I don't want to venture too much, but we have lost 2 councillors from my council in this year, because I can understand their concern. You can't, as I say, you come to serve your community. You want to do a good job and you end up with a potential criminal conviction. I don't think that makes any of us feel that we have enough stress. We were talking about earlier with our workloads as well and so forth going on. In terms of the sensitive interest, I totally understand that point, and I think Susan recognises this. But equally, as I've said, I have examples of councils across the country that have debated a motion as a council to deem everyone as having a sensitive interest that, you know, doesn't wish to have their address disclosed. So I think there is scope, and I'm hoping to start a debate. That's what I'm asking for this evening.
And thank you. I mean, as I've stood in a general election twice, you might as well stick a giant target on your house the second that you do that. I mean, it's how it goes. The thing that I would personally be asking for is that I was only made aware that you could redact your address as a sensitive interest after about 3 years of being a councillor. It wasn't something that was briefed to me on day one by anybody at all. And so for nearly 2.5 years, my address was in the public domain. And as far as I was aware, that was something that was just a requirement. I mean, I'd obviously had to state it as a qualification for election within the area. Nobody told me it could be redacted. And there you go. So it was up there for a long time before it was redacted. So I think one thing I would ask for is that perhaps we put in some kind of process to make sure we brief people at the councillor events, at the the first day that they join, that is something they can actually do, because if they don't know about it, they're not going to ask for it. In terms of the other element of that, I mean, I think we also need to probably do a better job of promoting things like Operation Forward, which is the police element to support councillors who are being harassed and things like that. Certainly, Joan and I, as Godalming Town councillors, have had some, the odd unpleasant comment recently. As I mean, I'll allude to more on the motion that we've got at Waverley on Tuesday, because that's part of the origin of that. Some of the emboldenment of some of the comments that we've seen recently. But the one thing I kind of do have to go a little bit against what you said on is that there are lots of privileges with being a councillor, but there are also duties too. And as far as I'm concerned, you do have to be diligent if you take the office in making sure that you do not breach the pecuniary rules. There are rights and obligations on both sides, and as far as I'm concerned, that's a pretty big one. And equally, the law is pretty clear on it as well. So if we are able to do more to redacting of addresses, also redacting of workplaces, because I mean, some people work for places that people don't agree with across the board and do attract other types of issue. And it might be that they don't want to put their primary workplace in the public domain either. My workplace was in the public domain for 2.5 years before it was redacted, because I didn't know that I could do that. So, and bluntly, the background I come from in terms of this sort of politics, if I wasn't aware of that, I suspect quite a few other people wouldn't have been. Anyway, thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just to say that we do induction training for councillors, and sensitive interest is included in that. It may not have been when
It was a different era since my apologies.
But also whether it is or it isn't, I do accept that there is an enormous amount of information to absorb when you first become a councillor. And we do repeat code of conduct training, but with limited engagement sometimes. But I think one thing that we could do, which might be quite helpful, is to write out to all of our councillors and make sure that everybody is aware of that, and invite them to apply for that if they think it is pertinent. I don't think, as an monitoring officer, that I could advise this council that they have a blanket position on sensitive interests, because the provision itself says, section 32, Localism Act, sensitive interests, says that the nature of the interest is such that the member and the monitoring officer consider that the disclosure of the details could lead to a member or a person connected with them being subject to violence or intimidation. So I do think something from the individual member to say that they feel that would be the situation. I don't think the council could just say, we're treating everybody's interests as sensitive.
But the bar would be very low,
but the bar
as per that guidance. The other thing I would just ask as well is that the group of people that are councillors and are often missed out on this, partly because of the very wide range of different towns and parishes. You've got some that are, five councillors and a locum clerk 1 or 2 days a week, and then you've got, say, Godalming and Farnham. Is this something that you, as monitoring officer for the area, could also recommunicate to town clerks, parish clerks, and town and parish councillors who would be even less aware of this than borough councillors probably are?
Yes, I mean, the town clerks tend to do their own training, but certainly we can work
It's
with
variable,
them.
that
and we
training though, I think, as I
Yeah,
said.
I'm sure it is. And we can share our resources with them and we can support them in providing that training and suggest they send reminders in. We'll take that as an action from tonight.
Councillor Ward.
Yeah, just something on this, which is interesting that the leader has raised, which we could perhaps take offline and think about within the company, the council, is that, excuse me, the first time your address hits the public is on your nomination papers. And when you go to your little voting booth, you see some address in Waverley. So some people know you don't have to put your address, and other people have their home address. So I think if the elections group can be briefed to actually make that quite clear to people that they, excuse me, I would quietly croak in the corner, so that they don't have to put their home address, that would be the first stage. Because once your home address is out there, everybody knows it. So maybe as an offline thing to think about, we could just reinforce it with elections to tell people when they stand, they can, if they wish, not disclose their home address.
And in support of the same comment, because John is absolutely right, and the briefings that usually take place to agents of large groups that we know are going to be standing, that information is sometimes not included, and there are often new agents in the mix that don't know that, and so you get that information not being passed through. So reminding everybody that every time, particularly as we've got a big election coming up, probably a good idea.
I think that was a very good discussion. Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you. Okay.
Any other comments?
Oh, sorry.
Just add, maybe we can repeat that fact that you can change your address maybe annually as a standard email. Because it looks like something has recently happened that has made you change your mind. So I think having a reminder, yes, that the possibility is there, will hopefully make people feel more supported.
And I just want to say I'm absolutely horrified that people didn't know that you could do that. Because I did from the get-go, from the first time I stood to be elected into public office. And I have had my address redacted because I'm a teacher and I really don't want my kids knowing where I live. So yeah, I'm absolutely horrified that members didn't know that. So I'm really pleased about this discussion. Thank you for bringing it up, Councillor.
I'm happy to move on.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. The Various Standards Committee will now move to vote on the motion to approve the recommendation in respect to this matter, which was set out on page 140 of our agenda. So do we agree? Great. Thank you.
And the Guildford Standards Committee will now move to vote on the motion to approve recommendations in respect to this matter, which is set out on page 1040 of the agenda. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
We now move to the final item, item 13, review of licensing committee terms of reference and hearing procedures. May I ask Angela Watson to introduce this item to both committees?
Thank you, Chairman. All members will be aware that both councils have been conducting a systematic review of all the terms of reference of its committees and associated constitutional rules and procedures. And tonight it's the turn of the licensing committee. We've carried out a benchmarking exercise looking at sort of 15 to 20 other local authorities, some of them who are considered to be sort of exemplars when it comes to licensing matters, just to do a comparison against our own terms of reference and rules. We've also consulted the licensing committee chairs, the relevant portfolio holders, and our licensing officers and lawyers. Very little of any concern came out of the review. There were some minor variations on a couple of things. One was to do with if you have premises site visits, also about how we handled sort of urgent matters. But officers are content that no changes are required to our existing terms of reference and procedures at this point in time. In fact, members might be reassured to note that of the consultation comments we had, actually both from members and officers feel that things are working well at the moment, current setup. I have mentioned in the report, central government has done a licensing sprint, as they call it, which is a sort of task force review of licensing, national licensing policy. That task force came back with, I think it was about 10 recommendations, and one in particular was on hearings and appeals. But the government has pretty much said, we're not planning to change anything at the moment. We've got far too much other stuff on. So there's not going to be anything, I think, coming out of that for now. But it's just a point to note that there could be something that comes along in the future that would be relevant. I think particularly around some of the sort of evidential thresholds that they that you need to meet for asking for a review of a licence, for instance. So some of that evidential stuff, I think there probably will be some changes there. So yes, as you'll see from the report, Chairman, members are being asked to just agree at this point in time that no changes are made. Just to be clear, it is on Guildford's improvement plan, the review of the terms of references. So we've brought it to this group specifically so that we can be clear that members are happy and we can sign it off in terms of the plan. That's it, Chairman.
Thank you.
Well, ask question.
I'm happy to propose that Waverley Standards Committee approves the recommendation in respect to this matter set out on page 152 of your agenda. May I ask another member of the committee to second the motion, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodrich.
I'm also happy to propose that Guildford Standards Committee approves the recommendation in respect to this matter, which is set out on page 152 of the agenda. Can I ask another member? Thank you.
May I now ask whether any non-member of the Standards Committee on the Waverley side wishes to comment? No comments? Thank you.
Nothing from Guildford.
Nothing from Guildford, okay. So we now come to comments from members of the committee. Do any members of the committee wish to comment or ask a question? No?
Would any members of the Guildford Committee like to ask a question?
Okay. The Waverley Standards Committee will now move to vote on the motion to approve the recommendation in respect of the matter set in on page 152 of our agenda. Are we agreed? Agreed.
The Guildford Standards Committee will now move to vote on the motion to approve the recommendation in respect of this matter. It is set out on page 152 of the agenda. Is that approved?
Agreed.
Agreed. Yes, agreed.
You go first in closing the meeting.
Oh, right. Yes, that threw me. Thank you. As there are no other items of business on the agenda, the Guildford Standards Committee, I am now closing the meeting. I'd like to say thank you to everybody.
We've also concluded business for the Waverley Standards Committee and now therefore declare our meeting closed. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.